Good evening, everyone. My name is Claire Sakaki. I am the executive director here at BARD. It's wonderful to see you all here for our BARD Explored talk, the Merchant of Venice Forum. I'd like to thank our moderator, Marsha Lederman. She is the Western Arts correspondent for the Globe and Mail. She covers everything from dance, film, literary works, theater, television, all of the above, and we are so delighted to have her with us moderating tonight's talk. So to Marsha and the panel, thank you all and welcome.
Hi, everyone. Wow, thank you for coming out. This is an amazing crowd. I'm really, really thrilled that we have so many people here. The Merchant of Venice is one of Shakespeare's comedies, but I don't think anyone finds it funny anymore. And of course, the topic is no laughing matter and very, very contemporary. Not just anti-Semitism, but xenophobia, which we are going to discuss tonight. Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. Yes, I'm not used to doing this. I will try to project. Has anyone here seen Merchant of Venice here yet? Wow, fantastic. So, you know, it's a very contemporary staging of the play, and I think that there's some good reason behind that. We'll find out about that. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we'll start the discussion. At the end, as Claire mentioned, there will be audience questions. I'm going to begin with Wendy Ballard. She is the apprentice director of the production, working with director Nigel Sean Williams. Wendy is a director, producer, actor, and a jazz vocalist, so she might sing for us if things get a little bit too strained. In 2015, she traveled to London to get her master's in directing. This year, she directed a production of Belfast Girls for her theater company, Peninsula Productions. And her next production, Sea of Stories, will be having its world premiere in White Rock at Coast Capitol Playhouse in August. And I also wanted to say that in 2013, Wendy was named Innovator of the Year at the Surrey Women in Business Awards. So welcome, Wendy. Mark Laren Young at the end there is a playwright, screenwriter, author, journalist, and performer. I first got to know him when he was writing theater reviews for the Vancouver Sun, but well before that he wrote the play Shylock, which imagines the experience of playing Shylock for a Jewish actor. Shylock premiered here at Bard on the Beach in 1996. It has since been produced throughout North America and Europe. It's in Prague now, I believe, and it's playing in translation there. His newest play, Bar Mitzvah Boy, recently won the 2017 Jewish Playwriting Prize, which is a really big deal. Beat out 218 other entries, which is amazing. Yeah. It premieres next March with Vancouver's Pacific Theatre. And his latest book, The Killer Whale Who Changed the World, is a national bestseller, but I don't think we'll be talking about it much here tonight, although you never know. So welcome, Mark. And next to me is Errol Durbach. He had a long and distinguished career as a Shakespearean scholar. He is professor emeritus at UBC, where he taught Shakespeare and taught specific courses about the Merchant of Venice. And he's also a longtime theater supporter, and he sat on the board here at Bard on the Beach for more than a decade until 2016. He also wrote the introduction to Shylock when it was first published in 1996, so they go way back. Welcome, Errol. I thought we would start by having everyone give a very brief summary of their connection to Merchant of Venice and their relationship to the play, and basically why they're here tonight. So, Errol, I'll start with you.
Okay. Somebody said to me, "Oh, you brought notes." And I said, yes, I'm an academic. I've not only brought notes, I brought books, right? I brought a copy of the play, you know? So, because I have notes, I'm going to read to you my very brief statement.
Wow, he's really prepared.
I'm really prepared.
Yeah.
Considering that there were no Jews in Elizabethan England, can we charge Shakespeare with anti-Semitism? If not, why did he depict his usurer as a Jew when so many contemporary Christian Englishmen were practicing a trade forbidden by the scriptures? If so, why did he give Shylock such emotionally effective speeches?
We will answer it all tonight. Wendy?
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. When I found out that I was going to be assisting Nigel on Merchant of Venice, I was very excited to be working with a new director and to be working on Merchant, and also very nervous. I was excited because it was a new director and it was Merchant, and I was nervous because it was a new director and it was Merchant. I was concerned, how was Nigel going to, what was his vision? How is he going to deal with the blatant misogyny in this play, and how was he going to deal with the anti-Semitism? I'm a feminist, and that's how I come to my art. And also, on a personal note, my mother-in-law is Jewish, and she's a Holocaust survivor, so that added a whole other complexity for me personally. Then I spoke with Nigel by Skype, because he was in Toronto, and he started talking about his vision for this play and how he really saw it through the lens of patriarchy and what that meant, and how he really wanted to bring that in, and that it was a play about fathers and daughters, and he was so passionate. So I got more excited, and I hope I can answer questions about the play for Nigel, as he's not here tonight. I will do my best. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, I should say Nigel was unable to be here tonight because he's not in town anymore. And Mark, finally, let's hear about your connection to the play.
So it's quite a treat to be here for this forum, because right before Shylock was debuting at Bard in '96, there was a forum just like this on pretty much the same topic. And I was sitting in the audience taking notes and adding stuff that everybody said into the play. So if you come to see Shylock, there's a bit where somebody said, "Why are you doing Merchant?" And the person from Bard said, "Because it's Shakespeare." And I thought, if that's all you got no excuse for doing it. And I put that in the play, and I'm like, yes! It's one of my favorite beats in the entire play, and it started at a forum just like this one. So yeah, Shylock has been a surreal phenomenon for me because I wrote it. Nobody wanted to go near it except a wonderful, brilliant, crazy director named John Giuliani. And he brought it here in '96, making me the first playwright not named William Shakespeare ever to be produced at Bard on the Beach. So since then, it has gone on and had this phenomenal life that I've followed that has enabled me to meet people who've played Shylock, talk to everybody involved with the Pacino version of Merchant except for Pacino, and just led to some amazing conversations. So I'm looking forward to another one of those tonight.
That's great. And I'm not really going to be giving my opinion, but I will just say, for me personally, I studied Shakespeare, not a surprise, in university, and I'm also Jewish, and my parents were Holocaust survivors. So I have very strong feelings about this as well. All right, I'm going to start by reading the first line of a review that Joe Lettingham, one of our best theater reviewers in the city, now that you're not doing it anymore, Mark, wrote about this production. She wrote, "I should probably never see The Merchant of Venice ever again. It makes me crazy." And when she tweeted out the review, she wrote, "Olivia Hutt and Warren Kimmel are terrific in The Merchant of Venice, but it's time for this merchant to retire." So, why still stage this play? Wendy, I'll start with you. Sorry.
I think it's really important that theater makes us think and question things. And The Merchant of Venice does that. It makes us think. It makes us question things. It makes us see ourselves. I think this particular production makes us see a terrible side of ourselves that is real. People really act like this. People are really terrible. And as a woman, when we were working on the show, some of the male actors were a little bit nervous about being so misogynistic and some of them kind of creepy. And for me, I kept saying, no, I need you to be that bad, because as a woman, I've had to deal with people like that. So to get to see that acted out on stage is really important. And the same with the anti-Semitism and the racism. My husband, after he saw the show, was quite emotional and was like, yes, that's what it's like. That is what it's like. I've seen it. That is it. So I think it's important to do Merchant of Venice for that reason, even though when I read it again after not reading it for years, I was,
Yeah. You know, one of the questions that's debated again and again is, was Shakespeare anti-Semitic in writing The Merchant of Venice, or was he trying to shine a light on anti-Semitism in writing The Merchant of Venice? Errol, can you enlighten us on that?
That's a huge topic. It's a huge topic. Was Shakespeare anti-Semitic or merely trying to shine a light on anti-Semitism? Yes, he was anti-Semitic. Yes, he was trying to shine a light on anti-Semitism. The point about the play, as I see it, is that it's not only a nasty anti-Semitic play, it's also a nasty Christian play. Nobody comes off well in this play. I mean, there's Portia, the heroine of the play, and one of her suitors is the Prince of Morocco, who happens not to be a white man. And she says to him as he leaves, "May all of your complexion choose me so," which is as racist a statement as you can make. The man is colored, and he's probably Muslim. And she makes this statement. And what does one think of Portia when she says that? And it's not only Portia, it's the whole society. And if you've seen the play, you will notice the spitting that goes on at the Jew. The play begins with tripping Shylock and spitting on him. There's that scene where Bassanio voids his room in Shylock's face. And one looks at these people, and Shylock says to them, "You treat me like a dog. If I'm a cur," he says, "beware my fangs." And in a sense, Shakespeare is showing you a society that is so anti-Semitic that it evokes in the Jews of that community a kind of correlative animosity. And it's an ugly play. I mean, it's really ugly from this point of view. It's very hard, I think, to sympathize with Shylock. It's very hard. I taught this play for many years, and it was a sort of contradiction of everything I'd been teaching my classes about Shakespeare. In the middle of one of my courses, Harold Bloom published his book called Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human, and it presented Shakespeare as a great humanist. And then I turned to the chapter on The Merchant of Venice, as did all my students. And because I have the note, I will read it to you. Here's Harold Bloom. This is the opening statement on his analysis of The Merchant of Venice. He says, "One would have to be blind, deaf, and dumb not to recognize that Shakespeare's grand equivocal comedy, The Merchant of Venice, is nevertheless profoundly anti-Semitic work. Yet every time I've taught the play, many of my most sensitive and intelligent students become very unhappy when I begin with that observation." My students became very unhappy as well. One cannot soft soap the point that this is an anti-Semitic play. Somebody pointed out to me, Heather Kennedy pointed out to me, that today, on July the 10th, the New Yorker has just come out with an article by Stephen Goldblatt who teaches the humanities at Harvard, I think, and he's written an article on The Merchant of Venice, in which he says if Shakespeare wasn't anti-Semitic, how come he put so much of his energy into Shylock? Could he have so identified with Shylock that he found lines like, I would not have given a wilderness of monkeys for the ring. You remember his daughter Jessica swaps her ring for a monkey. It's a ring with sentimental value. It was given to Shylock by his late wife Lear. And he says, I would not have given the ring for a wilderness of monkeys. It's a very moving line. So on the one hand, one feels great sympathy for Shylock and animosity for the society that spits at him. And then you look at Shylock, and he's an absolutely, incredibly awful human being. Is he a product of anti-Semitism? Yes, he is. Is the society an anti-Semitic society? Yes, it is.
So, Mark, I'll go back to you with everything that Errol just so eloquently stated, and Wendy. Do you think this play should still be staged?
Oh, absolutely. Because it sparks conversations like this. I mean, what excites me about theater, and one of the reasons that I've spent my life around theater, is that I love the conversations afterwards. It's not just about the play. I think probably my favorite part of a play is the conversation after the play. And Merchant sparks that like almost nothing else in Shakespeare. It keeps it going. I actually remember vividly after the premiere production of Shylock, going to the bread garden, which was near here. And there's these 4 people at the table, and I'm about to sit down after the show, and 2 of them smile at me, and 2 of them scowl at me. And they said, I said, hi. They said, we were just at your play. And these 2 scowling people are still not talking. They said, we went there as friends. I'm not sure how the evening's going to end up. I'm going somewhere else for my tea. But I love that. I love there's a conversation afterwards. I love that Shylock sparks this phenomenal conversation. And when you were talking about the magic of the words, one of the crazier things that I've got to do as a result of writing this play, a few years ago on Shakespeare's 450th birthday, an Vancouver actor named John Emmett Tracy did the 24-hour Shakespeare project. And I don't know if any of you were crazy enough or lucky enough to see it, but he staged everything, condensed versions of everything, and he asked me to play Shylock in the condensed version. And I discovered something really amazing about the part, which is it takes no time at all to hate everyone else when you were saying those words, because you feel the hatred off the rest of the cast. I've never felt that. I've never done anything, and here I am doing a staged reading with 10 actors I haven't met, and within about 3 lines, wow, I hated them. I really did. Like, it was just visceral, and I've never had that experience with anything else that I've read, and I've read plenty of plays, and there's magic in that. I think the same way that, people say that the witches in the Scottish play are a real incantation, there's something in Merchant that makes it stick. And one of the more amazing things I've been told, talking to people who've played the role, when Shylock played here, Patrick Stewart came and saw it. And this was one of the scariest nights of my life, because I first, Trekkie, deep, Trekkie. But beyond that, when I was writing the play, I knew that Patrick Stewart had written his own one-man show about playing Shylock. And I thought, if he hates it, I'm just going to throw out the script. And instead, we ended up talking Shakespeare all night after the play. And I had to fake being a Shakespeare expert. It was really fun. But one of the things that he said was that playing Shylock, no one else spoke to him in the cast. He said he'd sit for lunch and no one else would go near him. And so since then, I've asked other people who've played the role, and they said, you find very quickly that you're the only one at the table in the cafeteria. You're that people just isolate. And Patrick Stewart said he'd never had any other role before or since where that happened. Other actors I've spoken to who played the role have said the same thing, where they've never had that experience where everybody just isolates them. And somebody was telling me that you had to fight that with Warren. I think that Warren initially, that people were shying away, and that he was so nice that...
I can't speak to that because I'm not in the cast, but I know Warren himself he's a busy man too, so but they seem to be having fun backstage from what I can see.
Yeah, but I heard that there was like an actual effort to fight that effect, to make it easier to be mean to him.
Yeah, was there some sort of not an intervention, but was there any sort of exercise at all that was done to ensure that that wasn't happening?
No. There was some, we definitely at one point, Nigel brought all the women together by themselves and then all the men together by themselves to talk about what was going on in the rehearsal process and making sure that everybody was okay. And everybody wasn't okay, for sure. There was people that were really grappling with what we were doing and how it was affecting them. But Warren Kimmel, man, he just jumps in, both feet just in, and he really, he wasn't resistant to anything, and really wanted everything to go further, to go further, to go further. So, and he's such a lovely man too. So I think that, yeah, I don't think there was a need necessarily to have that discussion with everyone. I think everyone was pretty careful about how they were treating the material with each other as actors.
You might notice one moment in the play. If you've not seen it, watch for it. If you have seen it, you will remember it. When Warren Kimmel is standing in that alcove and he's mourning the loss of his daughter, and he chants the Jewish prayer for the dead. It's called the Kaddish. And it's a moment, I think, that's added to this production of the play. It is the most heart-moving moment in the entire play. Warren has a beautiful voice, for one thing, a beautiful singing voice, and his recitation of the Kaddish is the most moving thing in this play. And it's the same man, it's the same man who says, I will take my revenge on you, and I will better the example that you set for me.
I agree, that moment in the play is, I had shivers, and when I walked out, I said to the person I was with, he could have been a cantor.
Yes, yes.
His chanting of the Kaddish was gorgeous. I'm really curious about context, because we watched that play, and that scene where he's chanting the Kaddish and the characters down here are making fun of him, and it's so upsetting for us. Would that have been funny at one point when this play was staged? Would it actually have been comedic?
Well, Mark makes the point in his play. His character speaks about the various ways of portraying Shylock, or the way in which Shylock has been portrayed. Originally, I think I'm correct in saying this, he was portrayed as a clown. He was made with a huge false nose. He was a comedic figure. He then became...
Big red hair for Judas.
With red hair for Judas, and the orange tawny beard or whatever. And then you point out in your play that he's also been played sympathetically. Is that correct?
If that's all new. I mean, the sympathetic versions are modern versions.
The sympathetic versions are modern versions. He's played in a number of different ways. Originally, he was played as a fool. What was your question?
Was it, well, exactly what you're talking about right now? Was this funny that this
It was funny
man
for the Elizabethans, for the Elizabethans, who didn't know Jews, but this was a funny figure. He emerged out of the medieval tradition. He was, in the medieval plays, he was the embodiment of usury, of greed, of all those negative, deadly sins. and he was made funny, and so people laughed at him. It's hard to imagine now that one laughs at Shylock. Shylock, in a post-Holocaust way, is a different kind of figure. It reflects badly on us if we laugh at him. We sympathize to an extent. He makes it very, very difficult, but he makes it virtually impossible at the same time.
I'd like to speak to that. I wish that it was an Elizabethan thing to laugh at Shylock, but we have had people in the audience that laughed at that scene, that laughed in the court scene when he, when all the terrible things that happened to him throughout that court scene happened, that were laughing. And it was very uncomfortable because I wasn't sure if they were laughing because they were uncomfortable or if because they thought it was funny. And so, yeah.
Wow, I'm really surprised to hear
It
that.
was upsetting, for sure.
Whew. Because Shylock would have been the villain, the clear villain, originally. Is he the villain now? Is society the villain? Who is the villain of this play?
I think that Nigel, his take on this play is that patriarchy is the villain, and that in patriarchy there's a couple of people up at the top, and they have all the power. And if you're underneath, if you're not in that boys' club, you don't have the power. Religion, in this case, Christianity has the power. The law has the power. Being male has the power. And everyone else, including the people that are at the top, suffer because of this system that we are still living in, as Nigel believes. And that's how he feels about it, and that's what he wanted to say with the play.
Mark, what do you think?
When I interviewed Michael Radford, who did the Pacino Shylock, he was all about society. And that was actually one of the interesting splits when I've talked about this play, is that, and that production really illustrated it, because like I said, I interviewed pretty much everybody but Pacino. Every one of the American actors agonized, should I be part of this anti-Semitic play, right? They'd all basically gone to their therapists or their acting coaches or their agents and gone, I don't know if I want to be part of this play. And all of the British actors, 201, said, it's Shakespeare, it's not anti-Semitic, everybody's awful. And it was a complete split. In the North American take was this is anti-Semitic, it's dangerous, maybe it shouldn't be done. The British take was this is completely cool, it's Shakespeare, get over it. Wow. And I've run into that over and over again in conversations about this with different people.
Errol, have you found that as well?
What I try to make clear, certainly when I teach the play, is that it's about money. It's about people who have money. Money is the power in the play. I try to take it back to 1596 when Shakespeare wrote the play. What were the economic conditions in 1596 that made money such an issue, and people who had money and who lent money and who lent money at interest? What was the intention in writing this play? Having posed the question, I can answer it.
I do not need to be here. Errol is taking over.
No. I can tell you that there are two economic circumstances that make money tremendously important in this play. One goes back to the 1570s, when the Parliament of England passed a law, it was called the Usury Law, saying that it is permissible for English businessmen to take a 10% interest on their loans. Now, you might think this is nothing much, but it is the first time that somebody says the laws of the land will determine the power of money, not the laws of Scripture. Scripture says, lend taking no interest. Lend out of the charity and the goodness of your heart. In 1871, a law is passed that countermands the church and that says Englishmen may now take 10% on any loan they make. There are no Jews in England. The Jews were expelled in 1290 and were not admitted for another 350 years or something. They were admitted under Cromwell. Shakespeare's English was judenfrei, it was without Jews. But the Englishmen were now permitted, as it were, to be national usurers. And the Englishmen became usurers, that is to say, unchristian. And if they were unchristian, what were they? Well, Jews of a kind. Worse than Jews, says one of the economists, much worse than Jews. Jews would take only 10%, sometimes 6%. But these English usurers take I know not how much, they say. This is one circumstance in which money is power, and Englishmen have this power, which is unchristian. Shakespeare doesn't like that.
Wasn't Shakespeare also broke?
Shakespeare,
he was in theater, he had to be broke. So
Shakespeare's father, it is suggested, might have been a moneylender. I don't know.
cool.
And there was also the New Yorker piece you referred to,
Yes.
talks about a conversion in the family from, I think it was Catholic to Protestant.
Yes.
And that would have been fresh in his mind when he
Yes.
was writing the play.
Yes.
But if he didn't have, if there were no Jews around him,
Yeah.
why did he make this character a Jew? Was it the source text? What was it that led to
Why did he
Shylock?
make him a Jew? Because the Jews were brought into England, and I don't know, in the 11th century, they were brought into England because the English were forbidden to take usury, and the kings were wanting to go on crusades, and they needed to raise money through taxation, through usury, whatever means. The Jews were brought in because this piece of legislation in Deuteronomy did not apply to them as aliens in the country. By the time Edward II had exhausted the Jewish coffers, he expelled them. This was 1290, got rid of them. So they were in England for something like, 200-300 years before they were expelled. The other condition in England in 1596, when Shakespeare wrote the play, was not only that Englishmen were usurers, in other words, unchristian, and therefore other, and therefore aliens, and therefore Jewish. The other circumstance was that the landed gentry were losing their land to an unscrupulous, or so they considered them, rising middle class. Bassanio belongs to those people who are losing everything. Bassanio has no money. He has to raise money. He goes to his friend Antonio, who says, I haven't got ready cash, but I can get something for you from the Jews. And so he goes to Shylock, who goes to Tubal, and Bassanio gets the money. I mean, that is the economic situation in 1596, when Shakespeare wrote the play. 1 year later, 1597, Francis Bacon, who is one of the key economists of the Renaissance, says, absolutely ludicrous that we should blame the Jews for this. And it's absolutely necessary for us to practice lending and borrowing and usury. Otherwise, we cannot trade. We have now become a trading nation. And so it's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know whether he was writing in response to The Merchant of Venice, or just writing, a freestanding article on usury. But it's an article worth reading. It's called On Usury by Francis Bacon, and it justifies the taking of money on loans.
No,
Do you have it there?
I thought there was also a trashier reason, which is that Marlowe had just written The Jew of Malta. It was a huge
Jew of
hit,
Malta,
Yes.
that's right.
right? And Shakespeare was really good at cashing in on other people's hits. So, I mean, that was one of my big shocks going to theater school, was discovering that Hamlet was based on another play that followed almost every single beat in Hamlet. Revenger's Tragedy, it was like, no. I remember reading it going, oh my God, that's so copyright infringement in this era. But yeah, so I mean, going to the trashier commercial reason, Marlowe had just done really, really well with A Nasty Jew.
But does anyone stage The Jew of Malta anymore?
I saw it many years ago in England at the Aldwych Theatre.
I I don't know. I've never seen it.
I've
I
seen
think
it.
it is much more verboten in theater. Am I right,
They
Wendy?
just did it
Really?
not too long ago in New York with F. Murray Abraham, who did Merchant and the Jew of Malta.
Really?
Wow.
And talked about Shylock, actually, because he'd read that and it talks about both plays. Yeah.
What are we to make of Shylock's happy ending, the conversion? What are we to make of that? Wendy?
That says it all.
You know, when I read that again, because I hadn't read Merchant for a long time, and when I read it in preparation of working on this show, I was so upset reading it. I think, you know, when we're trying to figure out Shakespeare, what was he trying to say, what was he trying to do, you know, hath not a Jew eyes, all that stuff, you think, well, no, he's really saying, he's trying to humanize. But then that ending, and I don't know if that's because that's what was popular in that time and he had to have that ending, he had to give that to the people. I don't know what to make of it. It's really upsetting. And it's one of the pieces of this play that I grapple with. And every time we did it in rehearsal, and every time I watched it in preview and opening night, part of me just felt sick.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that makes it really hard to argue that Shakespeare wasn't anti-Semitic. I don't know.
Well, it's a really big problem, and I remember taking it to my English professor when I was a student. I was writing on The Merchant of Venice, and I said to him, what are we to make of this demand that Shylock should convert? And he said, don't you understand? It's a Christian gift. It's the way in which the Jew will be saved, just as his daughter Jessica is saved by marrying the Christian. She will go to heaven. It's a gift. It's a gift of heaven to Shylock by the court. It strikes me now as a terribly unmerciful sort of act.
Yeah, wow. I don't think you'd get that answer now.
I don't think
at
you
school. Mark, what do you think of the ending?
I was actually thinking the same thing. I did a different play about same-sex blessing in the Anglican Church, and I interviewed several people who wanted to save me by converting me. And that to them would have been a very good. I had these wild conversations, and after I said, "Can we talk about the conversion thing later?" and I'll go interview you. And I mean, I had no lack of interviews that went that way. So weirdly, that's where my head went. That I don't think they ever would have seen that as an unhappy ending. They would have seen that as, yay rah, everybody ends happily. Because we've added the. It was Olivier who added the cry at that moment. And until then, that was not a thing. And Olivier went, and has this off-screen, off-stage scream where you just go, oh my God, he's dying. And that wasn't how it was played pre-World War II.
Yeah, so the play has changed with context. I truly believe that. And are we in some way compelled to perform this play, to put it on, so that we can give a teachable moment to our audiences? Is that one of the reasons this play has survived? Errol?
I don't know, really. I don't know why people go to see the play. It's one of the great comedies, and maybe Claire knows why Christopher chose to stage it for what is the 4th time in the Bard season. It's because I think when you run for 28 years, there's some plays you're going to do again and again and again. The Merchant of Venice is a classic play, I wouldn't say it shouldn't be done. It's a great piece of literature in a way.
It's really beautifully constructed.
It's a beautifully constructed play,
if you look at how the scenes play out, just for comic construction, it is one of the better built plays. And those Portia speeches, I actually think one of the reasons that it lasts is because Portia is one of the great female roles. I think it is that is like bar none one of the best roles that Shakespeare wrote for a woman. And I think that's one of the reasons it lasts. Like, again, going to the trashy playwright place, I think there are a lot of actresses who are like, okay, yeah, it's problematic, but wow, do I want to play that part? Because it's, yeah. And now there are a lot of actors who are like, wow, do I want to play Shylock?
You all work in theater in some way, or have worked in theater. Is this a scary play to put on? Are theater companies afraid of putting this on because of potential backlash? Wendy, was there concern here?
I'm not sure. I can't speak for Bard. I know for me personally, there was, whoa, okay, I'm doing this play. So yeah, I can't speak for Bard. I'm not sure. But I think in my own company, I'd think long and hard about putting on this play. And I would want to make sure if I was putting it on, there was a really good reason for it, just like a lot of older plays. Because I really feel like if we're going to continue to do the same plays over and over and over, what plays aren't we doing? Because we're doing these plays. And if we're going to continue to do them, we need to shine different lights on them and see them in different ways, which I think Nigel did a great job of doing that with this play.
I think it's a play that actors actually want to play. I saw Dustin Hoffman in the play in New York one year. Dustin Hoffman, I've seen Laurence Olivier, Al Pacino in the movies. I mean, actors want to play this. It's actually a very well-written piece. He's a well-written character, which is the point of Stephen Greenblatt's article in the New Yorker today. He says Shakespeare puts all his energy into the writing of this part, so that it becomes an absolutely essential, playable part for an actor. And it just seems to me to be one of those parts that, you know, that if offered to me, I would accept.
Good to know.
I would buy a ticket to that. I would. You know, Wendy brought something up. You know, what is the reason to do this play? There has to be a good reason. Well, I think maybe we're sitting in a really good reason right now in 2017 with what's happening politically. The play is very contemporary, the production here at Bard. To what extent was that in the creative process, what was happening in the world, Wendy?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Nigel definitely wanted to shine a light that this isn't something from a couple hundred years ago. This is happening right now to people, to lots of people around the world, that they are suffering because of racism and because of misogyny. And so, yeah, it was very present in the room all the time. I mean, in the design of the show, in the costumes of the show, there's cell phones in the show, there's everything. Absolutely, yeah.
Mark, you were just telling me backstage about being in New York and seeing Julius Caesar, the Julius Caesar, not the Julius Caesar, God, but the one that's been much in the news.
Yeah, that was an amazing experience because the tickets are available only by lottery. So I just entered the ticket lottery for, you know, seeing Shakespeare in the Park. And I saw one of the previews. So I got home that night and thought, I haven't heard anything about this production at all. Because it turned out it was in previews. That was the night that Breitbart, Fox News, and everybody jumped on the show. That was the night the news story broke about the Trump Julius Caesar, if you didn't hear about it. And it was fascinating seeing that. And sitting in the audience, if any of you watched the series Scandal, there's an actor who's basically been playing Trump on Scandal for like 3 seasons. That's who played their Trump. That's who played their Caesar. Their Brutus was one of the actors from House of Cards. So they had 2 House of Cards actors opposite the guy from Scandal who'd been playing a Trump parody. And what they left out of all of the news stories, because it was, you know, pretty wild watching, you know, I mean, there was a moment when they came at him with an eyes, I'm like, wow, if the audience cheers, is this treason? Like, I'm just watching the audience going, how are people going to react? And they reacted the same way you usually react when Caesar gets stabbed. They gasped because it was really bloody. But the part that didn't make the news was the scene they added, which I'm sure you all remember from Julius Caesar, where he's in the bathtub naked with Melania, and he gets out of the tub stark naked to greet the senators. So you actually have this moment where I'm going, okay, not subtle at all, the emperor is naked. So that's what you can do with Shakespeare. Like, that's how up the minute. And the astonishing thing was, people talk with that production, you assume they changed everything. They changed like 5 words in one line. There's one line in Shakespeare which is like, if I stabbed a man, they would still love me. And they added, if I stabbed a man on 5th Avenue, they would still love me. That was the only change they made to the text. The fact that Calpurnia had Melania's accent, and Trump actually grabbed a woman's crotch when he came on, Caesar grabbed a woman's crotch when he came on stage. Yeah. But
not subtle at all.
Not so subtle, no.
Errol, do you think this is a good time for us to be watching Merchant of Venice?
Yes, I think it probably is, you know. When you watch the trial scene, it starts off as a civil action where one Venetian is bringing a suit against another Venetian. And it ends up as a criminal accusation against an alien, because that is how Portia characterizes Shylock at the end of the trial scene. You are an alien, she says, and if an alien tries to take the life of a Venetian, then he is subject to execution. So it's the predicament of the citizen who suddenly finds himself alienated. Somebody mentioned xenophobia, and I think this is the play about xenophobia, how we turn our citizens into aliens in order to justify our hatred of them.
What could be more contemporary or urgent right now? We would like to open the floor to audience questions. Mary Hartman has the microphone. We're going to ask you to stand up when you ask your question and to read it into the to say it into the microphone. If it's directed at a certain person, please indicate that. And
there's somebody at the back.
Okay. Errol is now taking over.
Hello, are we on? Hello? Yeah. Hello. So this is a question for all of you, I guess, and you can answer it in terms of directorially or dramaturgically, I guess. The character of Lancelot Gobbo in it. That's this. Yeah, that's Merchant. Okay. And how to approach having a clown in this, because it was a comedy, but I mean, because Shylock, as we were saying, would have been a clown, or not, I guess, a clown like one of Shakespeare's clowns, because Lancelot serves that purpose. But what do you do with him when you go, okay, we're not going to consider this a comedy anymore, but we have this character in here. So when you're thinking about it or staging it, what have you considered, I guess, in your time, in all of your different times with this play?
Wendy, do you want to talk about that?
Well, a couple of things about that. First of all, normally in Shakespeare, there's Lancelot's father as well, and Nigel got rid of that character because he wanted the show to really be about fathers and daughters. And our Lancelot was very angry, a very angry young man, which plays into how Nigel was directing this play. So it wasn't directed for comedy, as the rest of the play wasn't directed for comedy. I don't know if that answers your question.
Mark, you were talking about the clown, about Shylock the clown.
Yeah, well, Shylock would have been a clown character, but with Gobbo, the one that stands out for me is a Bard production. I haven't seen this one yet, where Colin Heath, who's gone on to work with Cirque du Soleil, played Gobbo, if I'm remembering correctly, and it was just like a tour de force of comic tumbles and turns, and it was just, it was just like this whole extra level they'd kind of added on to the play to lighten it up. And, Shakespeare tosses clowns in the tragedies as well as the comedies. So I don't think there's anything too problematic about going, okay, and now for something completely different, we're going to have Gobbo juggle. So.
Errol, do you want to?
Well, what struck me in the Lancelot subplot was his reference to sleeping or having fornication with a black person, and that seemed to me to be, an aspect of the play, and so he's integrated into the thematic system of The Merchant of Venice.
Thank you for the great question. Any? Okay, I know. I'm trying to. I want to give these guys a break because I've had my back to them all night. Hi, could you stand up? Thanks.
Sure. Hello.
The mic is not on.
Well, I think it is.
Now it is.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
I kind of project too, so I try to hold it away. The Jessica and Lorenzo subplot is bothering me. I've always taken it just as, okay, on the side you've got a Shakespearean love story, everybody's happy and everything. This one, it's just horrible, and it seems to get worse as it goes on. I'd particularly like a comment from the creative team, but other people, what's really happening there? Is it...
It is. I agree. I have a really hard time with this. His daughter leaves him for this and steals from him to be with this Gentile. And again, this is something we're supposed to be cheering. Oh.
Are you asking specifically about Nigel's interpretation in this production or overall that relationship?
Well, yes, this production, but also what underlies it. It almost looks like a double layer of abuse.
Right. Well, if I can speak for Nigel, which I've been doing all night, so I'll continue. He really wanted, again, Jessica needs to get away from her father because he's an authoritarian, and she needs to get out and away from that. And so for her, the way to escape that is with Lorenzo. That's her way out. And as Nigel directed the show, Lorenzo, as time goes on, becomes her father. He becomes another authoritarian. He becomes abusive. He yells at her. I was speaking, I believe, with Mary earlier, and she was saying, he is really this great guy in the beginning, and then he turns, and that's what happens in abusive relationships. And I believe that Nigel, he never wanted to let up. He didn't want anybody to get out of this place scot-free, and he just wanted it to just keep going. That Lorenzo kind of gets turned because he starts running Portia's mansion, and he gets sort of brought into money and gets corrupted by it and becomes one of those people.
I thought in this production she was miserable in the end, and I felt like that was her.
Yeah.
I liked that because, sorry,
it works.
Love the misery, but it felt like it showed that she had made a mistake.
And I would also say that thematically it's quite important. She is his flesh and blood. And he says that 2 or 3 times. And in vengeance, he takes flesh and blood back again.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. It sort of tips him over. It tips him over, and her defection is a kind of death for him, which is why I so liked the Warren Kimmel's chanting of the Jewish prayer for the dead, the Kaddish.
I'd like to say something about that she made the wrong choice or whatever. I think what Nigel was getting at is that for people like Jessica or Shylock, there is no choice. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. So unless you're in the boys' club at the top, there are no choices, really. And even Portia herself says that line, the word choice. And Portia, with all her money, still doesn't, her only choice is to say, okay, well, I'm just going to go be destitute.
Yeah.
So nobody really has choices except for the people who hold the power.
Mark, do you want to add anything? Okay. All right, another question? Yes, up there. Sorry, Mary. Now you're going to have to. Now you're going to earn your theater company dollars.
Sorry, I wrote it down. Do you think that the self-fulfilling prophecy that Shakespeare creates around his villainous characters like Shylock and even Caliban from The Tempest undermines their power or lends them a voice through which they can share their subjugation and lived experience? Sure. Please.
Maybe just a bit slower.
Yeah, okay. Do you think that the self-fulfilling prophecy that Shakespeare creates around his villainous characters like Shylock and Caliban undermines their power or lends them a voice through which they can share their lived experience?
Through which they can share their lived experience? Ooh, Errol.
Does it lend them authority?
Power. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I don't think Shylock's a villain. So that would be my response. I don't think he's a villain.
Nor is Caliban.
No, yeah.
He's like anti-heroines, I suppose, like Shakespeare.
Anti-heroines. Are they anti-heroes?
Right.
I think those are the characters that are sparking the most interesting conversations today.
Yeah.
I don't think we've got 200 of you here to talk about As You Like It. You know, like, it's just, it's a very cool production, but I don't think we've got 200 people in here, you know, with people looking for the microphone to, you know, to go with that. So, and Caliban sparks fascinating conversations.
Yeah, Caliban has his kingdom stolen from him by Prospero, and he's reduced to the level of a slave and servant. And I guess if he does take some kind of action against Prospero, he's certainly entitled to do so. And I think Shakespeare gives him some of the best lines in the play.
And I think that also has contemporary resonance right now. Any other questions?
Is this one okay? Can you stand? Yeah. I'm just curious because while we've been talking, I was thinking, why is there not, the Merchant always brings up these, you know, strong emotions, and for good reason, but why do we not have the same for a play like Othello, which has the same themes, very strong racist themes in Othello? We have a black man married to a white woman, and there's horrible racial slurs all through that, but yet nobody sits around and says, should we do Othello? Nobody says, let's not do Othello. Why are we saying then, let's not do Merchant of Venice?
Yeah, they do.
I think,
do they do that?
Yeah.
I've never heard it. So.
People are, you're going to think I'm kidding. I'm actually not. When I first came up with this play, I was writing a play about censorship. I didn't like where it was going because the work of art was kind of And I was reading a book called Reinventing Shakespeare, which is all about how Shakespeare became a phenomenon. It's a phenomenal book if you can find it. And I read this great chapter that was all about black communities protesting Othello. And I turned to my friend Art Norris and went, that's something! That's what I should... And Art looked at me and went, are you out of your mind? Do Shylock. And I went, right. But that was sparked by reading all the stories about black communities in America that were protesting productions of Othello, and that still comes up. So, yeah, I don't... So...
Errol has some reading material.
I brought a Times literary supplement with me. And there's an article by a man called Jerry Broughton, who has just written a book about Othello called The Orient Isle. And he talks about the animosity against blackamoors, black people and Moors, Muslims in Elizabethan England. And Othello is both, except, of course, that he's been Christianized. But that doesn't prevent the society from belittling him. And at the end of the play, when he kills himself as a Muslim Turk. In other words, he reverts back to his origins. So he is the Christian killing the Muslim at the end of the play. But it's Othello committing suicide. The whole book is about racial attitudes to black people and Muslims. The name, again, is Jerry Broughton, and the book is The Orient Isle. And he looks at all the critics who wrote about Othello in Shakespeare's day. And they all said how dreadful that the court of Venice should give the command of the army to a black man. They called him a Negro. And it just shows you the racism that is current in Shakespearean England, and that Shakespeare himself absorbed and transformed. Othello is a captured blackamoor who is Christianized before being restored, as it were, to Venice. But it's a very interesting book. There's a play also called Red Velvet about the first black actor in England ever to play Othello. It's a really great play. It's a very modern play. The Othello in question is acted by Adrian Lester, who is the black man, and his wife, who is, I believe, a Bengali, wrote the play. It's called Red Velvet, and it's about the career of the first black actor. His name was Ira Aldridge, to play Shakespeare, to play Othello on the London stage, and how the audience reviled him because he touched a white woman, which was a no-no, and because the slave trade had been ended in England and people were resentful. So they resented the black man who played Othello. And it's a wonderful study in racism. He runs away from England, he ends up in Poland, and the play ends with this black actor putting white makeup on because he's going to play King Lear in Warsaw.
But you do bring up an interesting point. Now, I went to school a long time ago, but I learned Othello in high school, but they would not have touched the Merchant of Venice in high school.
No.
Do they not teach Othello anymore?
They teach Othello.
No forums about Othello.
Mm.
No. Yeah. No, that's a good point.
It's true. She has a good point.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a very
good
interesting
point.
question. Okay,
There's
another
a young
question.
lady over there.
There's a young lady over there.
There's somebody there.
Yeah, and we are running out of time, so let's. Hello.
Hi. Do you find that it's this, like, is Shakespeare portraying that it's the society that has conditioned these characters to act so horribly? Or is it that that's merely an excuse that they use to target other people? Like, when they have the chance, they will, like, be nasty towards someone. Like, is he saying that humans are inherently nasty? Or it's that this society has conditioned them to be that way?
We talked a bit about society being the villain in this play. Are people inherently rotten? Or are we easy to make rotten? Anyone? Errol? Does it say anything about that?
I'll bet you it does.
The answer.
I quote. Wow. Shakespeare's play has a habit of luring us into complicity with many of its nasty prejudices. I don't know whether that's true or not. I think it's not.
I think it's not as well.
I think
it makes it question our prejudices.
But people have protested against this play, The Merchant of Venice, because in fact they say, as the Jewish community said in Stratford, Ontario, we will not tolerate the staging of this play because what it does is evoke anti-Semitism in the audience. Now, I don't know whether that answers your question or not. It seems to suggest that, and he suggests, Broughton, that in fact we respond positively to the negative implications of the play. I hope not.
I don't think that's true anymore.
I hope not.
It might have been true
It
at
might
one
have been
point.
true then, but I hope not now.
Someone over here has a question. Sorry, Mary.
It's okay. No problem at all.
Good exercise, Mary.
Mary does not have to go to the gym tonight.
No.
Could you stand up, please?
I have a question that's very specific to this production of The Merchant of Venice. I wrote down where it happens in the play because then you'd know exactly what I meant. So I saw the preview, and I saw it again yesterday afternoon at the matinee, and there was a line added that really disturbed me. There were lots of things that disturbed me in the play, but specifically this line was like, I caught my breath. So maybe, Wendy, you might know what I'm talking about, but you probably are the best one to answer this. So when they say, "Art thou contented, Jew?" And then he says, "I am contented." And then Bassanio kind of lunges for Shylock, and he says, "Kiss my tuchus, goy."
Whoa.
Whose idea was that?
The actor playing Bassanio asked for some racial slurs and asked Warren if that was okay. And to my memory, that was in rehearsal and throughout the previews as well. I think sometimes it isn't heard because of everything that is going on in that part. Yeah.
Do you really think it added something to the play? There were plenty of racial slurs all the way through. The fact that it was so contemporary made it even more,
right.
You know?
The only thing I can answer is that I know that when my husband came to see the play, that seeing the cruelty and seeing it in such a modern way, and that it didn't stop, that it just kept getting worse, that for him was, I don't even know the word, but it was freeing, or he saw himself being represented. He saw what his family has had to deal with. And so that's the only way I can answer that question.
I didn't hear that line either. I saw the last preview. Did you hear that line?
I heard it vaguely, and I think you pointed it out to me at the end. Yes. And I've seen productions of the play where Bassanio is a little creep. I mean, Charlie Gallant was quite sweet in this play, but I've seen creepish Bassanios. Bassanio who marries not for love, but for money, because Portia has all this cash. And who doesn't know when he looks at the caskets which one he should choose? And so Portia has to help him. It was cut in this play. Tell me where is fancy bred, or in the heart or in the head, words that rhyme with lead. And so eventually the guy makes the choice because he's been directed towards the lead. And you know, a phony little fella. And it would have suited that kind of Bassanio well enough to have made that sort of statement. But this Bassanio was too charming in a way, you know, too sweet, too nice, too handsome, too kind, who seemed genuinely to love Portia as the play progressed. It starts off where he's sort of indifferent to her and more interested in her money. And so, you know, it wasn't appropriate for him. It would have been appropriate for other Bassanios, but not for this one.
But that line doesn't, that line just makes you feel more for Shylock.
Yes, it does,
that
indeed.
He would have to face such...
Yes, indeed. Such
abuse.
bitter abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, I hate to end on kiss my tuchus goy. But we are, I know someone else has a question, but we are really up against the clock, unfortunately. Do we have time for one more? Okay, one more. All right, please.
Mine is not really, oh, sorry, I have a loud voice. Mine is not really a question. It is a comment. I think it's really important that we do get uncomfortable. I think we need to hear these things because human beings don't learn from anything, and they continue to do all these horrible things to each other. So I loved this play, the way that Nigel and you, Wendy, did this play, because I felt so uncomfortable. I was squirming. And I think that's a good thing. And when Shylock goes running off at the end, or walking off at the end, I am not well, I want to go running after him and say, don't kill yourself. Because that's, and you know, at the residential schools, everything, we have to look at it right in our face. We can't just say, no, we shouldn't do that anymore because it's not appropriate. It is appropriate. We always need to be reminded of what is wrong and somehow try to fix it.
Thank
you,
very
Jennifer.
much. I'm very happy to end on try to fix it, and we will end on that. Claire is going to come up and say a few words, but I just want to thank you all for really thoughtful commentary tonight. Thank you so much, and great audience questions, and really, thank you so much.
So thank you all. This has been wonderful. I know I've learned a lot. You've given me lots to think about. I hope you all feel the same. If you have not seen The Merchant of Venice yet, I hope this will encourage you to do so. It is an incredible production. It will give you lots to think about. It is uncomfortable, but we do hope that you will come and join us. And if you have seen Merchant, please come and see Shylock. There's only 7 performances, and we do encourage you to get tickets soon because there are so few, but we would love to continue this conversation with you as we go throughout the season. The one thank you I did omit at the start was the person who thought and wanted to have this forum was our Director of Marketing, Heather Kennedy. So Heather, thank you for this wonderful idea. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your great questions. And to our panel, thank you for your time. And to Marsha, it's wonderful to have you here. So thank you all very much. Good night.